Hi, this is Ibarionex from the Candid Frame. One of the rules that you hear early on when it comes to composing photographs of people is never cut somebody's head off or cut part of their heads off. And usually it's a mistake because of sloppy composing. You're not really looking carefully in the frame. But my question is, can you do it intentionally and still get a good photograph? And if so, how? So I chose 3 images to illustrate that point. So let's get to it. All right, here we have a shot by Gerry Orkin. This was shot with a Fuji X-T2 at 1/1600th of a second at f8, ISO 800. So Gerry here doesn't literally cut off the subject's head as a result of cropping, as I suggested earlier. Instead, he uses shadow to obscure the details of this woman's face above the lip line. So we lose the details in the eyes, the hair, the ears, all of that is gone. And the rest of her and the scene is revealed by the direct sunlight that hits the overall scene. And the direct sunlight here works really beautifully because it makes those colors pop. The reds, the blues, the browns, the greens, just rendered exceptionally well as a result of the quality of the light and the colors that are present in the scene. But when you don't see a person's face, which is the first thing we kind of look at when we look at a photograph of a person, we start looking at other things to try to discern who this person is. Whether it's a portrait, whether it's a candid shot, whether it's a street shot, we almost immediately go to the person's face and eyes to identify who they are, what kind of person they are. And we look for all these qualities. We may look at their clothes and their hands and their shoes, but almost the very first thing we all as human beings do is look at someone's face. So when you're deprived of that, you start looking at all the other sort of signs to sort of discern who this person is and what we can assume about this person and have that sort of contextual information to sort of piece together what's happening. And because we don't have the face here, we start looking for other clues. And for me, I immediately look at her hands, and I can tell by the texture of her hands that she's an older woman. I can see from the clothing that she's wearing and by the denomination she's extending to this person on the far left of the frame that this is somewhere in Asia. Of course, you can take a look at the caption and see Yangon, but deprived of the caption, you start looking at all these other clues to kind of discern, okay, who this person is, where are they, what's going on. I'm sure this is some sort of exchange, either for a product or a service. I'm not sure exactly what that may be. We do see the scissors and the shears on the near that black plastic bag, but I can't immediately identify what this exchange is for. People who are more familiar with the culture or this location might have a better clue than I do. But I'm looking for those things, as you probably do, when you're taking a look at a photograph like this, where you're trying to identify who the person is, what's going on, where is it. So why did this shot work for me, even though I don't get to see her face? And besides the things of color and light, which are great, for me it's the gesture. It's the way she's leaning forward and extending her arm and her hand to give or receive this denomination to that other person's hand. For me, the body language, the gesture, is what makes the photograph. The building blocks of the overall composition in terms of placement, in terms of use of light and shadow, in terms of color contrast, in terms of sharpness, all of those are playing a role in the success of the image. But the expression of the body language and the gesture really makes the shot for me. So it's this idea that, yeah, I can cut off someone's head. I can remove details from the face. But when that's gone, how can I express something about the subject? And for me, that always comes down to gesture. And gesture can be important even when you're seeing someone's face. We've talked about this in previous videos. But I think that when you are removing the details of the face, by whatever means, whether it's the use of shadow, whether it's aggressive cropping, you're going to have something else in order to make the expression of that person, their personality, their persona, for the viewer to experience it in a way that's really engaging and interesting. And I think Gerry does a great job at doing that here. Now, here we have a shot by Mambo Ferido. This was shot with a Fuji X100T at 125th of a second at f2.8 at ISO 1600. So again, we have a shot where it's not cropping that eliminates the presence of the person's face in the shot. In this case, it's the newspaper that he's holding in front of his face that removes all of that detail. And so what we really have in place of the face and the head is the headlines and the text and the photographs of this newspaper in Singapore. And what makes this shot work for me, just like the previous shot, is the gesture, is the way he's holding the newspaper with his hands. And we get this great diagonal implied line from the right hand down to the left, which sort of contrasts with the sort of repeating horizontal lines that are implied throughout the frame. But here it's just the way he's holding the paper, how it's splayed across his head. I like the implied diagonal line. I think is really important here because it adds a sense of energy to the frame. But immediately you get a sense of energy from this shot, even though it's pretty static. I mean, virtually everyone else that's in the frame who's thrown out of focus because of the limited depth of field is really not moving. I mean, they're moving, but in terms of the context of the frame, they all seem very static. I mean, the only one who really seems like there's any movement is this woman in the back or this guy in the back with the pink pants who looks like he or she is about to take a step off of the curb, but everyone else is fairly static. And the only person who's sort of expressing anything is this person holding the newspaper. And the way that they're holding the paper, especially the way they're raising it up a little higher in order to read probably what's on the bottom of the page, provides this wonderful expression and gesture to the shot that makes it really, really work. This could be considered a sort of nothing shot because it's just a picture of someone reading a newspaper. But it's the way that he's doing it that, as a result of Mambo here making the photograph, that makes for an interesting shot. So again, we're not seeing the face. We don't know, who this guy is. You can tell from the body and from the hands that he's probably a little older. But beyond that, we really don't know much about him other than the fact that, he's in Asia somewhere and he's reading a paper. And I can't read, this language, so I don't know exactly what the headlines are. But that's of no consequence because it's really about the bodily expression in the shot that makes for a really interesting image, even though we don't get to see the person's face. The only person's face that we see clearly at all is this person here on the cover of the newspaper who's on the front page, and that's it. All right, here we have a shot by Anang HanaFi. This was shot with a Fuji X70 at 1/800th of a second, f14, ISO 800. So here we have a shot in which the person's head is cut off by aggressive cropping. The head is cut off literally at the shoulders, and all we see is the rest of this man's body as his feet are buried deep in the sand. And we see other faces and other bodies in this scene, particularly the young person here who's lying in the sand and whose face is framed by the standing subject's calves. And we have this wonderful gesture of that person with the hand over their forehead. And then we have this sort of dramatic sort of hero pose of the man who's standing up with his hands on his hips. And then we have these other subjects here to the left in the side of the frame who are enjoying this day at the beach. But what sense do you get about the guy who really is dominating the frame of the shot, even though we're not seeing their face and their head? The body language seems to express a lot. There's a sense of power, of control that is expressed here, not only by the body language, but by the low camera position as we're sort of looking up towards this figure. And the contrast that's created by the person who's lying prone on the ground is sort of a really nice counterpoint to that. It really plays off really well. It seems like there was something going on, though I suspect this was sort of a non-moment, but because of the direction that the woman on the left and this person on the right seem to be looking towards something that's happening on the shore or in the distance, there's a sense that there's something else going on, but it's really not important because it's really about the body language between these two figures, and these two people on the edges help to create a sort of framing device to help keep us sort of visually. It creates a visual weight for this area here, and these just serve as counterpoints. But again, this is all about body language, isn't it? It's all about gesture, and the gesture of these two is so strong that it just produces a very dramatic photograph to my eye. And I like that juxtaposition. Just having a person standing there alone, if this guy was just standing there alone on the beach, even with this great cloudscape in the background, wouldn't necessarily make a great shot, but it's the presence of this body language as opposed to this that makes it really, really interesting for me. And so you can see from the three images that we just talked about how important gesture and body language can be if you make the conscious choice to cut off in one way or another a person's features from the frame. It places even more importance on gesture, on body language, on someone's personality being expressed by something else other than their facial expression. Hope you enjoy that. And if you're going to be in the Los Angeles area on the weekend of April 8th, you may want to join me at the Los Angeles Center of Photography for a day of street photography. I do this photography at the center about twice a year. And we hit the streets of Los Angeles. I show you how I shoot, how I see light. And you can actually see me doing it in the field live and in person. And then we go back to the location and then we download the pictures and we do a critique session, something that's often missing from a lot of other workshops that are out there. And it's a really fun day. It's intense, but you'll come away a better photographer. I guarantee it if you join us. And you can find out more by going to lacphoto.org and signing up. Spots are still available. And if you're new to The Candid Frame is a podcast which features conversations with some of the world's best photographers. We've been doing it for 11 years, and we have over 365 interviews in the can. Our most recent interview was with Scott Strazzanti, who is a documentary photographer, a photojournalist, and a street photographer. And he talks about several personal projects that he did. One that took years to complete, in which he actually documents what happens to land and how it's used when it moves from being a family farm to being a suburban residential area. And it's not just about the buildings, it's about the people that occupy and use the land. It's a fascinating, fascinating story. And you'll definitely want to take a look at the pictures and hear the story by checking out the episode of The Candid Frame, episode 365. And the easiest way to get access to all of our interviews is to download the free Candid Frame app. Their links are available on the website. And if you want to submit images to our Flickr pool and be part of the community, all you have to do is go to Flickr, do a search on The Candid Frame, and just ask to be added, and I'll be glad to do that. So thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you next time.